Ganesha narrows her eyes, watching Decalane carefully. Did you come looking for me? In truth, Decalane had stumbled upon her by sheer luck, having successfully evaded the clutches of the pretentious noble gathering. But the way she looks at him, almost expectant, makes him wonder. Do these two have history? The Scarlet Adventurer chuckles when he tries to play it off. Just got lost, he lies effortlessly. Ganesha smirks. Sure you did. She then surprises him by apologizing for a failed mission, no less. She requests that they drop the matter, confirming they had previous dealings based on commissions. She sighs, rubbing her temples. I was supposed to recruit a certain kid for you, but I couldn't do it. Ah, now things make sense. The original Decalane had planned to use a prodigious child to handle research in his stead while he took the credit. Classic villain move. Ganesha gives him a long, appraising look before dropping an unexpected question. How long are you going to keep up this act? Her tone is careful, deliberate. She's testing him. Decalane exhales, the weight of her words settling over him. Before Wu Jin took over this body, the original Decalane lived recklessly, burning bridges, amassing enemies, and destroying his own reputation for the sake of his inflated ego. But that's not him. Not anymore. I've decided to live differently, he admits. Ganesha blinks. That was not the answer she was expecting. She had fully prepared for an outburst, maybe even an attack. The old Decalane would have tried to kill her by now. Kim Woo Jin, still adjusting to his new reality, wonders just how unhinged this professor used to be if attacking one of the strongest adventurers alive was something he'd do on impulse. Because make no mistake, Ganesha could obliterate him with ease. Her most terrifying attributes, invincible body and master of martial arts, are no joke. She's reached the peak of physical stats, a walking calamity in human form. The fact that Decalane's past self never sent assassins after her is proof enough. Because if he had, well, he'd be dead by now. As he processes all this, Ganesha watches him closely, wondering if this man hit his head or ate something suspicious before coming here. There's something off about him. Decalane, having achieved all he needed from this conversation, moves to leave. Ganesha raises an eyebrow, surprised by his lack of hostility. You're really not going to send anyone after me? She calls out. Decalane pauses, then turns slightly. It would be beneath me. For the first time in her life, Ganesha is stunned into silence. Back in the hall, Decalane reflects on his encounter. If he wanted, he could leverage the Uclane family's influence to pressure Ganesha through the guild. But that would only increase his chances of death. And considering his life expectancy is already laughably short, he'd rather not tempt fate. And then, death flag prevented, Decalane freezes. Excuse me? Bro was not expecting to die tonight, yet here he is, learning that this conversation could have been fatal. Even social gatherings are trying to kill him. Fantastic. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Rayleigh, an adventurer with ties to Julie, watches her fidget with barely contained frustration. Something wrong? She asks, smirking. Or have you finally made progress with your dear fiancé? Julie's eye twitches. Rayleigh, enjoying this far too much, clarifies, I mean Professor Decalane. Rumors are flying, you know. Julie scowls, her mind flashing back to their last meeting, the sheer indifference in his voice, the way he dismissed her entirely. Our relationship is non-existent, she mutters. And then, as if summoned by sheer spite, Decalane appears. The moment he steps into the hall, people expect him to stay, to mingle. After all, he's famous for loving these gatherings. Instead, he walks straight past Julie without a glance. The whispers start immediately. He didn't even look at her. Did something happen? Are they fighting? Even Kim Woo Jin, the developer of this world, hadn't anticipated this narrative shift. A week passes and Decalane has been grinding. Apart from his usual magic studies, he's introduced actual physical training into his routine. Why? Because just a few days ago, he nearly died experimenting with reckless magic. The man was on the floor, coughing up blood, looking like a tragic protagonist. Any normal mage would have perished. But thanks to his Iron Man attribute, he survived barely. The cause? He attempted to engrave fire control alongside his telekinetic magic to boost his metal manipulation. It was meant to streamline his abilities, cut down the time needed to master additional spells. Instead, it nearly sent him to the afterlife. Now, he's working out like his life depends on it. Because, well, it does. By the end of his session, he's looking shredded. After wrapping up his morning routine, it's time to get back to work. Alan arrives at his office, delivering an urgent letter. It's from the Magic Tower. Breaking the seal, Decalane reads the message. Audit hearing scheduled in 6 months regarding your research. Prepare all necessary documentation. A long sigh escapes him. This is bad. If his research is called into question, his position as head professor will be at risk. And if he loses that title, his chances of returning home are gone. Time to find anything worth salvaging from his so-called laboratory. The lab is a disaster. Dust, debris, scattered papers, it looks ransacked. No way the original Decalane frequented this place, otherwise it wouldn't be in such a state. Then something catches his eye. A particular area looks deliberately messed up, as if something was hidden there. Using his telekinesis, he sifts through the mess without dirtying his hands. A glimmer beneath the debris, a book. The moment he pries it open, his comprehension skill activates. A golden glow flares, signaling the significance of the research inside. Bingo! Despite missing pages, despite its incomplete state, the book radiates importance. His wealthy magnate and sharp eyesight attributes confirm it. This is something valuable. And then something else falls out. A pendant. Inside, a picture. Ephraim and Luna. And her father? Decalane stares at it, realization dawning. Her father. Worked under him. Of course he did. That's why the Luna family despises Professor Decalane, because he used her father, trampled over his achievements, and left him to ruin, all for the sake of his own reputation. Because of him, Ephraim has endured a brutal life. But now, things will be different. Decalane has made up his mind. He's going to complete the research himself using his comprehension skill. And when it's finished, he'll do something the old Decalane never would have considered. He'll credit her father as a co-author. Character development? In this villain? More likely than you'd think. The scene shifts to a bustling cafe on campus. A group of commoners has gathered, forming an unofficial alliance. If they don't stand together, the nobles will stomp them out before they can secure any footing. They turn to Ephraim for her opinion, putting her on the spot. Ephraim hesitates. She understands their struggle, but technically, she was a noble until she lost everything. Now she doesn't even own a place to live. So what does that make her? The orange-haired girl leading the discussion grins and throws an arm around her. Forget the past, you're one of us now. The rest of the group nods in agreement, designating her as their representative. Someone with a short, cropped hairstyle suggests making their group an official student club, but to do that, they need a professor's approval. That's where things get tricky. Professor Relin? Out of the question, he practically worships the nobility. Professor Carmel? Even worse. Someone jokes about Decalane, and Ephraim nearly chokes on her drink. The orange-haired menace claps her hands together, eyes sparkling with mischief. Why not ask Professor Decalane? The audacity. They all turn to Ephraim expectantly. What? No, absolutely not. One of the guys nods sagely. Actually, it makes sense. He looks down on everyone, so status doesn't matter to him. Also, he did save Ephraim from expulsion. Another adds. Clearly, she's his favorite. Ephraim nearly dies on the spot. There's nothing going on between us, she snaps, horrified. But it's too late. They've already decided. The moment she sees the grin on the orange-haired girl's face, Ephraim bolts. She's not getting involved in this nonsense. Unfortunately, Orange Menace chases after her. Just ask, what's the worst that could happen? I die. But then, Orange suddenly skids to a stop, eyes wide in terror. Ephraim barely manages to halt before crashing into her. What? She follows her friend's gaze and sees him. Professor Decalane standing right there watching them. Orange flees on sight. Ephraim, left alone, wants to die. The professor is already turning to leave, and she knows this is her only chance. Hating everything about her life, she calls out, "Wait!" Decalane stops, turns, raises an eyebrow. She forces the words out. "I need your approval for a student club." A long pause. Then, to her complete shock, Decalane takes the letter, signs it without hesitation, and hands it back. "Have the details sent to my office." Ephraim stares at the paper, stunned. He approved it? Just like that? Orange Menace, who has somehow reappeared, shrieks in joy. Meanwhile, Ephraim is losing her mind. She cannot figure this man out. Fast forward to Decalane's lecture. Today's topic, the building blocks of magic elements. But rather than a basic rundown, Decalane goes deeper, explaining the distinction between categorical and pure elements, a concept most mages barely understand. Ephraim should be paying attention. Instead, she's staring at him, struggling to process the past few days. Is he helping her out of guilt? Pity? Because no matter how much he plays the part of a decent professor, she knows what he did to her father. If he really feels responsible, then why not admit the truth? Why keep up this act? Julia nudges her. "You okay?" Snapped out of her spiraling thoughts, Ephraim blinks. Julia glances toward a group of students across the hall. Ignore them. Ephraim follows her gaze and sees Sylvia, along with a handful of nobles who hate her for what happened at the last event. She exhales. "It's fine. I just want to focus on the lecture." Zooming back in, Decalane explains the significance of magic circles. But something is different. His lectures used to be theatrical displays of his own power, a way to flaunt his superiority. But today, he's teaching differently. He demonstrates how the structure of a magic circle changes a spell's behavior. He introduces a technique he calls flowing fire, a method that lets fire move like liquid by combining it with water-based spell structures. The students watch in awe as a purple flame slithers through the air like a stream of water. Even Sylvia, a prodigy raised on pure intuition, is visibly intrigued. Theory was never emphasized for noble mages. They relied on their innate talent. But Decalaine is proving that magic isn't just instinct. When the lecture ends, Ephraim finds herself begrudgingly impressed. She wasn't expecting him to be this good. As she packs up, a commotion erupts outside the lecture hall. Annoyed, she peeks through the door and immediately groans. The nobles. Harassment? Again. Because of course, her fight with Sylvia made her public enemy number one. Before she can turn away, something catches her eye. A letter slipped under the door. She frowns, bends down, picks it up. A sponsorship certificate. Her first instinct? It's a joke. No way anyone from House Delayed would sponsor her. Still, she tucks it away, heading straight for the administration office just to confirm. And then, the receptionist checks the seal. Authentic. Ephraim's brain short-circuits. Her body jolts like she's been struck by lightning. This is real? She stares at the certificate, hands shaking. Pure, unfiltered joy surges through her. She grabs her own face to make sure she isn't dreaming. For the first time in a long, long while, something has gone right. Ephraim cowardly scans her surroundings, paranoia kicking in. Did anyone see her reaction? Is someone watching? She shrinks beneath the table, gripping the sponsorship certificate like a lifeline, heart pounding in her chest. 100,000 elne. To put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of 100 million won. A stupid amount of money. And now it belongs to her. She panics. Her hands move on autopilot, shoving her belongings into her bag. If this is some kind of setup, she needs to leave before things take a turn. Even the cafe staff seem to be eyeing her suspiciously, or maybe she's just losing her mind. Either way, she's ready to bolt. Then in her frenzy, she slams her head against the table. Bang! The sharp pain is immediate. She clutches her forehead, groaning, and that's when reality really sets in. This isn't a dream. The absurdity of the situation makes her want to weep. The girl who was alienated for so long, who had spent years clawing her way through hardships alone, finally had her talent recognized. Someone had seen worth in her. It fills her with a foreign but intoxicating feeling. Hope. A single act of recognition, and suddenly the world doesn't seem as cruel as before. Meanwhile, across town, tensions are brewing at the Uclane Manor. Decalaine's half-sister is seething. She's just received word that her dear brother is headed to the prestigious Schatzenival auction. Again. Her eye twitches as she recalls last year's disaster when he blew 10 million elni on investments that no one ever saw again. What insanity is he about to unleash this time? At the auction house, Decalaine lounges in the VIP waiting room, sipping his drink in peace. For once, he's not here to throw money around just for the sake of it. This time, he actually wants something worthwhile. Ever since he began training with telekinesis, he realized something crucial. He needs a metal that can keep up with his abilities. His current workaround, using wood steel, is a joke. Today, the real deal is up for bidding. His moment of solitude is shattered when she appears. Julie. Again. His lovely fiancée locks eyes with him, irritation practically radiating from her. She rises from her seat and marches toward him, glaring. Decalaine sighs internally. Here we go. Julie doesn't waste time with pleasantries. We need to talk. Her voice is tight, barely restrained. Oh, she's mad. She brings up the recent disciplinary hearing, the one involving Sylvia and Ephraim. Decalaine barely reacts. That was weeks ago. Why are you bringing it up now? Julie's jaw tightens. Because you crushed their dreams. Ah, so that's the angle she's taking. She accuses him of being too harsh, of discouraging young talents with his unyielding attitude. And then, with a final sharp glare, she delivers what sounds suspiciously like a breakup speech. Decalaine remains calm, watching her carefully. He sees through her words. She's testing him, waiting for a reaction. But here's the thing. He wants this engagement to end. Julie may be a stunning, powerful knight, but she's also a walking red flag, the kind that leads directly to his early grave. If they actually go through with this marriage, there's a very real chance he won't live to see their first anniversary. So instead of protesting, he simply stays silent. Julie takes his lack of response as confirmation and turns to leave, but Decalaine, feeling particularly annoying, decides to have some fun. So, he drawls, you did come all the way here just to argue with me? Julie whirls around, face heating. I came here for something important. He raises a brow. Uh-huh, and yet here you are, getting worked up over me. Her eye twitches. Shut up, she storms off, fuming. And for the first time, Decalaine finds her expression. Cute. The thought unsettles him. He quickly brushes it aside. His emotions are not his own. It's just Decalane's body reacting. An announcement rings through the auction hall. The bidding is about to begin. Good. He needs the distraction. The first item is unveiled, a handcrafted vase from an Eastern artisan. The moment Decalane lays eyes on it, his wealthy magnate attribute activates, bathing the vase in golden light. Oh, interesting. If his skills are highlighting this item, it means one thing. It's far more valuable than its price tag suggests. Without hesitation, he places a bid. 2.5 million elne. Sold. From there, the spending spree begins. A rare ring, a pair of enchanted scissors, a rune necklace, each one bathed in golden light. By the time Decalane places a 5.5 million elne bid, the auction house is shook. His fiancée, meanwhile, is resisting the urge to strangle him. To her, he's nothing but an attention-seeking, money-wasting idiot. But she has her own agenda. She's here for one thing, the legendary Winter's Fire. The final item of the auction is revealed, and all chatter dies down. A stone unlike any other. The ethereal snowflare. It glows with a soft luminescence, its surface shifting between frost and flame. Decalane's breath catches, one of the 10 rarest metals in existence. Normally used for forging swords, it holds the paradoxical properties of both fire and ice. For him, it's perfect. For Julie, it's essential. Bidding begins. Julie confidently places an early high bid 30 million elne. Victory seems assured. Then 31 million. All heads turn. Decalane. Julie gapes at him. You bastard. The war begins. 32 million. 33 million. 35 million. They go back and forth, an absurd battle of sheer stubbornness. The crowd whispers, speculating that Decalane is obviously buying it for his fiancée. If only they knew. Finally, at 42 million elne, Decalane lands the winning bid. The auction house erupts in applause. Julie, however, looks like she's ready to murder him. He sighs, already feeling the headache forming. She's gonna hate him for this. Then again, what else is new? And no, you perverted gremlins, I know what you're thinking, and no, it's not like that. Leaving the room, Julie ruins her engagement day for herself, but the real casualty? Decalane's ego. Despite her pride as a knight, she ended up tethered to a professor with a god-awful personality. Sure, she was granted captaincy for the engagement, but the rumors? Brutal. She knows exactly who was behind spreading those nasty whispers him. That was the day she decided. This man was unworthy of her love. And yet, here she is, facing that same gut-wrenching feeling again. To her surprise, her fiancé approaches her, his expression oddly soft. Were you after the snowflare stone too? Her fury ignites instantly. Is he provoking her? Julie is ready to tear into him. But then, I'm sorry, her brain stalls. She needs a second no. A full minute to process what the hell just came out of his mouth. Did Decalane just apologize? Before she can demand an explanation, he politely takes his leave, walking away as if he hadn't just paralyzed her entire existence. Julie's thoughts are spinning. Why? What's his angle? This isn't just out of character, it's impossible. Lost in her thoughts, she almost doesn't notice her older sister Josephine, who offers her a ride. With no other options, she follows, still unable to shake the bizarre encounter. Meanwhile, Decalane ponders his situation. He knows Julie must be fuming right now, and honestly, fair enough. He did take the very thing she was after. But the real shock? No death variables triggered. He expected some kind of divine punishment, or at the very least, another death flag being raised, but nothing. Which only makes him wonder, just how much of an asshole was the original Decalane for Julie to actually kill him in one of the game's routes. Regardless, he returns home, greeted by visibly distressed maids. The cause of their panic becomes clear the moment they mention her. Uriel. Decalane barely has time to brace himself before his half-sister materializes behind him like a damn horror movie villain. You reckless idiot. Her voice is ice cold. How much did you spend this time? Decalane sighs. Here we go. She's livid. He knows she wanted to invest that money into securing new mines. Instead, he casually burned through it at an auction. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, he tells her that he bought something that will return their money with profit added on top. She is not convinced. In fact, she's more pissed. Stop using me like I'm disposable, she snaps, voice trembling. For the first time, Decalane actually feels a little guilty. His poor sister is sobbing. All she does is clean up the messes he leaves behind. And this one? Massive. She lays it all out, how she's barely keeping their finances together, how she's fighting an uphill battle to secure their future, and meanwhile, he is out there blowing through 150 million like it's pocket change. Her aura flares red. Her voice drops into something dangerous. He is seconds away from death. Decalane's villain's fate attribute activates a very bad sign. Then another light appears, a golden glow shining from within her raging aura. He pieces it together immediately. This is one of those situations where, if handled poorly, he dies. But if handled correctly, opportunity. So naturally, Decalain goes with the worst possible response. Don't worry about it. Uriel explodes. She roars, throwing every single hardship at him. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the way she's had to endure insult after insult to keep the family name afloat while you didn't have to go through all that. His calm response halts her. The words hang between them, her fury momentarily replaced with stunned silence. She points at him. You're the reason we lost so much after our parents died. Fair. And yeah, obliterating 150 million in one day is objectively a terrible decision. So, to shut her up, I'll make you head of the household. Uriel freezes. What? Decalain crosses his arms. You're clearly better suited for it. Take the position. Her brain refuses to process his words. You're joking. I'm not. She stares at him. Hard. Then, her expression wavers. She wants to believe him, but she can't. Decalain sighs. I'll swear on it if that's what it takes. Her entire demeanor shifts. A sworn oath is no joke, it's a magical contract, one that kills the oathbreaker. She studies him, trying to figure out what game he's playing. Fine, she relents. But if you go back on your word, I will bury you. With that, she storms off to fix his latest catastrophe. Death flag prevented plow. Decalain exhales, relieved. No major disaster. No immediate death. Good. At this rate, his escape from this world might actually be possible. But then, a familiar presence steps into the room. Ganesha. She leans against the doorframe, watching him with amusement. So it's true. He raises a brow. What is? You're really trying to change. Decalain shrugs. Not that deep, she chuckles. Could have fooled me. Then without warning, she drops a bombshell. Uriel doesn't have a single drop of Ukraine blood. Decalain short circuits. Excuse me? He knew they weren't directly related, but no blood relation at all. Ganesha smirks at his reaction. You did ask me to investigate it. Oh, right. Still, his response is immediate. Doesn't matter. Ganesha studies him, seemingly surprised. Really? Not even a little? He shrugs. I don't care about blood. She's my sister. A pause. Then Ganesha nods. I'll keep it to myself then. Before leaving, she tosses another nugget of crucial information his way. The 6 snakeheads are moving. Decalain steals. They're a notorious criminal syndicate, each leader worth a fortune in bounties. They're after the item you bought at the auction, she warns. You should be more careful. And with that, she disappears into the night. Decalain watches her go, then sighs. His sister's origins? Irrelevant. He's not even the real Decalain, so family blood or not is what he chooses it to be. But the 6 snakeheads? That's a problem. A very big problem. Decalain finally has access to the system store. Fantastic. The problem? Everything costs a fortune, and he's sitting at a grand total of 0 store currency. Skills can only be purchased with store currency, which is awarded in limited amounts per level. Worse, every time he gains access, the cost of skills doubles. That means wasting even a single point is not an option. His training has been going well, but his physical strength is still lacking. If he wants to improve, he needs better mana quality. That will allow him to train more effectively. He needs 4 more store currency to make his first purchase, and needs to find a way to earn them quickly. Before he can come up with a plan, Alan arrives, looking visibly uneasy. Without saying a word, he hands over the latest issue of Wizard Journal. Decalain casually flips through the pages until something catches his eye. A wanted notice. A very interesting wanted notice. Lockhart, the wizard killer. A ruthless mage hunter, rumored to be stalking the outskirts. Decalain remembers this character well. In the game, Lockhart was an absolute terror for new mage players, an unavoidable nightmare that would have weaker players throwing their keyboards across the room. But Decalain, he's not just any mage. This is an opportunity. If fate wants to dangle store currency in front of him like a delicious prize, who is he to refuse? Don't worry about it, Decalain tells Alan, setting the journal aside. Just head to the library and wait for me. Alan looks skeptical. Okay? Then completely out of nowhere, Decalain asks, do you want to be an assistant professor? Alan malfunctions. What? Decalain doesn't bother explaining. He just tosses Alan a bangle engraved with the Ukraine emblem and moves on. Alan stands frozen, unable to process what just happened. This is the same Decalain who spent years roasting his lack of talent, and now he's promoting him? Before Alan can regain his ability to form coherent thoughts, Decalain casually hands him a pouch filled with money. Go buy yourself something nice. Then he leaves. Alan is left in a daze, watching his professor disappear into the distance. At the staff-only library, Decalain gets to work. He's here for 2 things: Luna's research papers on pure elements and any grimoires related to manipulation magic. The research papers? A complete disaster. full of errors. He ends up correcting them out of sheer frustration. Then someone catches his attention. Sylvia, in the executive reading room. The hell is she doing here? 10 minutes earlier, Sylvia had talked her way into the restricted section using her status as Elad's successor to bypass the librarian's protests. Officially, she was looking for a very rare book, an ancient novel written in ethanol, the language of the extinct fairies. Now, she's standing at the shelf, blissfully unaware that Decalain is closing in. He doesn't waste time. Should I summon the disciplinary committee? Sylvia startles and whirls around, gripping the book tighter. Shit. Rumor had it Decalain hated libraries. But here he is catching her red-handed. She scrambles for an excuse. Professor Relin gave me permission. Decalain instantly clocks it as nonsense. Both the librarian and Relin broke regulations, and in his book, that means they all deserve punishment. Before Sylvia can process what's happening, Decalain plucks the book from her hands. An ethanol novel. He eyes her. Can you even read this? Her pride flares. Of course. He clearly doesn't believe her but lets it slide. Next time, don't abuse your family name. If you want a book, get someone else to borrow it. And with that, he leaves. Sylvia fumes. She only wanted to study the fairies, but Decalain humiliated her for no reason. She hates him, and yet she can't stop thinking about the inconsistencies he pointed out in the ethanol language. Meanwhile, deep in the mountain of darkness, a group of adventurers navigates dense terrain. Decalain watches them closely. It's their first practical training session, but they're holding steady. The mountain is a high-risk, high-reward zone, filled with rare magical resources and venomous creatures. Protective barriers are in place, but the head professor overseeing this area, vacant. Professor Relin, forever stressed, voices his concerns. Then Decalain does something wild. He volunteers. The room stills. A professor mutters, "That's how a leader should act." Internally, Decalain is laughing. He only stepped up because his system handed him a side quest. Darkness of the Magic Tower. Reward, store currency plus additional achievement bonus. Translation? Something big is going down in that mountain. As the expedition sets out, the game's tone shifts from fantasy to full-on horror. 9 hours later, at a cafe near the Magic Tower, Ephraim is thriving. She's loaded now, so she treats her friends to snacks, giddily celebrating her newfound wealth. Talk shifts to the upcoming approval of their club and the recent training session in the mountains. Then a scream. A tremor shakes the ground. Someone runs past crying for help. Julia, instincts on high alert, shouts for Ephraim to stop, but she doesn't. She takes off after the figure. Then, everything shifts. The world around her distorts, and when she turns, Julia is gone. Ephraim stares, disoriented. The street is unfamiliar. The buildings are wrong. The person who cried for help still lingers ahead. Cautiously, she calls out. The figure turns. Their mouth stretches into an impossible grin. And then they scream. Not a human sound. A monstrous one. Ephraim readies herself. Then, out of nowhere, Decalain appears, striding forward like he owns the nightmare. She immediately points a finger at him. "Did you just attack a civilian?" Decalain doesn't even look at her. "Use your eyes." The illusion shatters. Not a person. A demon. The creature snarls, lunging. Decalain moves like lightning. His body reacts before his mind, instinct sharp as a blade. His blood ignites. The Euclane lineage born to hunt demons awakens. And the demon learns too late that it picked the wrong mage to mess with. Deculain, fully embracing his instincts, swears to annihilate the creature. Fury surges through him as the demon charges with all its might, its grotesque form twisting in the dim light. The professor's blood burns, the ancient power of his Euclane lineage roaring to life within him. With a flick of his wrist, Deculain conjures a violent surge of mana, slamming into the demon and forcing it back. The creature screeches, its form flickering as it struggles against the sheer force of his attack. But it's no use. Deculain has already completed the side quest, store currency secured, his first demon kill. "Filthy thing," he mutters before delivering the final blow, his power ripping through the demon's body. Yet something unsettles him. As the creature crumbles into the abyss, a realization strikes him. This is not random. The presence of this demon is a sign. The game, despite lacking a player, is moving forward. The system is unfolding, piece by piece, and now, Deculain must brace himself for what's to come. The next day, within the university walls, Ephraim jerks awake, gasping. Her surroundings blur, the sterile white of the ward's ceiling pressing down on her. A nurse by her bedside startles at her sudden movement. "You're awake," the nurse states, setting aside a damp cloth. Ephraim presses a hand to her pounding temple, memories fogged and disjointed. "The forest," she croaks out. "The mountain of darkness," the nurse corrects, adjusting the sheets. A demon appeared. "You were caught in its illusion and lost consciousness." You were lucky someone found you and brought you back safely. Ephraim Styles. Who? The nurse hesitates before answering. Professor Deculane. A surge of frustration tightens her chest. Of course it had to be him. She swings her legs over the bed, her eyes darting toward the clock. Panic sets in. What day is it? Wednesday. The answer nearly knocks the breath from her lungs. She's been unconscious for 36 hours? Without another word, she shoves past the nurse, grabbing her bag as she sprints through the halls, weaving past startled students. Ephraim barely makes it to class, her friend shooting her a relieved glance. You scared the hell out of me. I checked the clinic, but you were still out cold. Before she can respond, Deculane strides into the lecture hall, his presence commanding silence. Alan follows close behind, lugging a heavy wooden box. Ephraim eyes him warily. Who the hell is this guy? Deculane doesn't waste time. This is Alan. He'll be assisting as my teaching aide. The students exchange murmurs. Deculane has always taught alone. Why take on an assistant now? Speculations swirl. Perhaps it's a way to bolster someone's career. But with Deculane? Highly unlikely. Ephraim's mind drifts to her father. A man of great knowledge, yet never once given the opportunity to become a teaching assistant. But Deculane, of all people, is granting this position to someone like Alan. Before she can dwell on it, Deculane speaks again. Today's lesson is practical. He gestures toward the board. You have 3 hours. The class sets to work, but Ephraim finds her thoughts straying. Her bracelet. Deculane's bracelet. They are eerily similar. Did her father? No. She shakes her head, forcing herself to focus. This isn't the time. Across the room, Sylvia finishes her assignment in a staggering 25 minutes and 15 seconds. The entire class gapes in disbelief. Deculane barely acknowledges it, giving her a curt nod before allowing her to leave. But Sylvia doesn't feel victorious. Her fingers tighten into a fist as she watches Deculane turn away. She still hates him. Time trickles by. One by one, students finish and leave. Eventually, only Ephraim remains. She stares at her blank parchment. She is failing. Slamming her forehead against the table, she grits her teeth. Sylvia finished in 25 minutes. She couldn't even start. I'm an idiot, she mutters. A complete worthless failure. You're wasting my time. Ephraim's head snaps up. Deculane leans against his desk, arms crossed. 5 hours and 40 minutes, he states. How much longer do you plan on sitting there? She feels a lump form in her throat. I can't, his voice cuts sharp. You failed. Get over it. She flinches. No one cares if you're surpassed, mocked, or humiliated, he continues. If you lack the mental fortitude to push forward, you will never reach my level. With that, he turns and leaves. Ephraim stares after him, stunned. The room is empty. The clock ticks, a slow, agonizing reminder of her failure. She clenches her fists. She won't accept this. The words repeat in her mind, carving themselves into her bones. A sudden pulse of energy flares from her bracelet, emerald light twisting around her wrist. Heat surges through her veins. She grits her teeth, her resolve steeling. I'll do it, she whispers. No matter what. Deculane, watching from a distance, allows a small smirk. She is growing. She must. The mountain of darkness was just the beginning. A greater storm is coming, and Ephraim must be ready. The age of overwhelming evil is approaching. Soon the world will need heroes. And he refuses to let himself be outclassed. The following evening, Ephraim bursts into Deculane's office, parchment in hand. I finished it. He glances at the clock. 6 hours and 25 minutes. Far from ideal, but the quality, first place. A system notification pings in his mind. Side quest complete. Store currency earned. Deculane leans back in his chair, smirking. Took you long enough. The next day, Deculane barely makes it down the hall before a white-haired man intercepts him. Zitevaram Bruggen, Julie's older brother, head of the Freyden family, one of the strongest named characters in the game, and a man Deculane would rather not deal with right now. Zeit, smiling in a way that doesn't reach his eyes, clasps Deculane's shoulder. I trust you have time for dinner? Deculane, noting the distinct lack of choice in the invitation, nods. Of course. Meanwhile, across the Freyden estate, Julie nearly snaps her sword in half upon hearing the news. A dinner? With him? Her blade swings, slicing through the air with a deafening boom. The walls tremble under the force of her strike. Damn him. Damn Zeit. Damn everything. She refuses to be toyed with. Behind Julie, her subordinates stand stiffly, their eyes trained on her as if she might explode again. One of them finally dares to speak. Your swordplay is turbulent today, Captain. The speaker is Varan, a member of the Order of Hidekine, and Julie's most trusted subordinate. He watches her closely, not with judgment, but with understanding. Julie exhales sharply, collecting herself. then quickly apologizes for her lack of restraint. But Varan shakes his head. "It's not your fault," he mutters. "It's unfair that the head of the household keeps forcing this engagement on you, to expect you to marry someone like Destined." Julie tenses. "Enough, don't speak ill of him, it doesn't matter anyway." Varan falls silent, but his expression hardens with determination. He's already chosen a path to prove his loyalty, to make sure Julie finds happiness. And to do that, there's a task only he can accomplish. Meanwhile, at the Bercht Assembly of Elders, a tense discussion unfolds. The sudden appearance of a demon in the Mountain of Darkness has sent shockwaves through their ranks. The Elders, masters of mystic arts and ancient magecraft designed to combat demonic entities, have come to a grim realization. They can no longer sit idle. The leader of the conference issues an order letters must be sent to the 12 sorcerers. The summons is official. Elsewhere, Destined is busy sorting through his newly acquired treasures from the auction. He slips Rufarin's ring onto his finger, feeling the subtle pulse of enhanced mana recovery. Then, the ancient rune necklace, a storage tool for excess mana. He considers Ganesha's warning about potential theft and decides to secure the rest of the artifacts in a vault. But as he reaches for the Frost Flame Stone, he frowns. Something's off. It refuses to respond to his mana. Destined wasn't expecting it to obey him instantly, but he hadn't anticipated outright rejection either. His telekinesis barely nudges it. The stone pulses faintly, almost as if it's actively resisting him. He recalls spending an ungodly amount of money on it, and the thought of it being useless grates at him. Then something clicks. Communion. It's a concept he vaguely remembers from one of the books he skimmed in the library. A method used by legendary sword masters to forge bonds with their weapons. Not just wielding them, but understanding them. If this applies to swords, could it also apply to magical artifacts? Only one way to find out. Destined places his hand on the Frost Flame Stone. The moment his fingers make contact, an overwhelming surge of energy floods through him. He gasps, then immediately grits his teeth as a wave of comprehension crashes over his mind. A system notification pings in his vision. Frost Flame Stone comprehension, 0.1%. His mana capacity increases by 300. A significant gain, but at this rate it'll take a year to fully unlock its potential. Destined clicks his tongue in irritation. Too slow. He shelves the problem for now and shifts his focus to the next looming disaster on his schedule. A dinner with Zeit. And then it hits him. The death anniversary. The realization sends a chill down his spine. That event had been set in stone before he even possessed this body. And it's only 3 days away. When Destined arrives at the restaurant, Von Meschle, Varan is already there. Julie should already be inside. As he steps in, Zeit greets his sister warmly, his sharp eyes scanning her appearance. "You look beautiful tonight," he says. Destined's gaze flickers to Julie, and for a brief moment he's caught off guard. She's breathtaking, worlds apart from her usual armor-clad self. The shift is striking, and though he's never been particularly sentimental about appearances, he finds himself momentarily admiring the effort she put into her attire. Standing beside Julie is another presence he should have noticed immediately. Josephine, Julie's older sister. Not just any relative, a dangerous named character, a sociopath. Josephine is the mastermind behind Shadow, an underground intelligence network with eyes and ears everywhere. Strength-wise, she's comparable to Zeit, making her an opponent Destined would rather avoid altogether. But more than anything, she is obsessed with Julie. And anyone who even remotely threatens her sister, consider them dead. Destined already understands why Josephine hasn't slit his throat yet. He's technically still on good terms with Julie, but her calculating gaze tells him everything he needs to know. One wrong step, and she will make him disappear. The moment Destined takes his seat, Zeit wastes no time. "When will you set the engagement ceremony? 3 years have passed already." Destined is about to respond when Julie interjects. But before she can speak, Zeit cuts her off. The adults are talking. Destined nearly laughs at the sheer audacity. Julie stiffens, her jaw clenched. Josephine, sipping her wine, smirks. Destined looks at them all, then exhales. "I'm leaving the relationship entirely in Julie's hands. If she doesn't want it, I won't stop her." The room freezes. Julie's expression flickers between shock and something unreadable. Zeit, however, narrows his eyes. "That's not a decision you can make on your own. The family heads won't allow it." Julie, trembling, suddenly requests a private conversation. Zeit eyes her carefully, then agrees. He and Josephine step out, leaving Destined alone with Julie. Josephine's laughter echoes from the hallway, but Destined knows better. The woman is using some kind of eavesdropping magic. He smirks. "Good. Let her listen." Looking directly at Julie, he says, "I've already spoken my truth." Julie scowls. "Truth? You're the same man who used my influence to arrange this marriage. You made deals with your elders and compensated them, and now you're acting like you're the victim." Her voice rises, frustration spilling out. You manipulated me, forced me to step away from battle, tried to push me into the Order of Hidekan, all to keep me under your family's control. And when I refused, you spread rumors about me. Deculane meets her glare calmly, and I acknowledge that I was wrong. Julie flinches. Of all the things she expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. Deculane sighs. Your family controls your fate more than I ever could. If not for your reputation, they'd have no reason to oppose breaking the engagement. Josephine, listening outside, goes still. Deculane leans back, smiling. If you truly want to break free, you need to leave them. Julie stares at him. And what? Run away with you? No. His voice is softer now. We stay engaged but never marry. I'll be your shield. You get to live your life free from interference. Julie's heart pounds. Why would you do that? Deculane tilts his head. I just want you to smile for me. Once a month. Julie gapes at him. Even Josephine, eavesdropping outside, momentarily falters. Deculane smirks. You really are cute when you're flustered. Julie, snapping back to reality, furiously shoves the nearest wine glass at his face. He barely dodges. Worth it. Julie clenches her fists, nails digging into her palms. She finds his words infuriating, humiliating even. And yet, if he's serious, if this isn't some elaborate manipulation, she needs proof. Real proof. Josephine, watching from the sidelines, narrows her eyes. Deculane's behavior is unsettling, too smooth, too perfectly timed. But what if, just what if, he's genuine? She decides to keep an eye on them, just a little longer. Deculane, oblivious to the brewing surveillance, sighs in relief as a system notification flickers before his eyes. Death variable avoided. +2, store currency. 3 days pass, and the air carries a heavy, familiar weight. A death anniversary looms. Deculane's car rolls to a stop before the cemetery gates. He steps out, the chill of the approaching evening settling into his bones. The setting sun casts an eerie golden glow over the overgrown grass and ancient tombstones, bathing the world in an almost ethereal melancholy. This place holds no significance for Deculane, but for Kim Woo-jin, the man he once was, it does. A memory stirs. Let's add an Easter egg to Deculane's backstory, In-yu had said, voice laced with excitement. Kim Woo-jin had frowned. That's extra work, but it'll make him feel real, she insisted. Trust me. He had relented, not because he agreed, but because In-yu was In-yu, and she never took no for an answer. Now, standing before a gravestone, he reads the name etched into the stone. Inu Aravan. His breath catches. Her name. She had given her own name to Deculane's lost fiancé, embedding herself in his past, immortalizing her touch within the game's world. Why, he whispers. Kneeling, he reaches out to trace the name, fingers trembling. A flood of memories crashes into him, her laughter, her stubbornness, her warmth. 7 years of companionship, arguments, and quiet understanding. And now she's nothing more than a name on a tombstone. Tears fall freely. Then a shift, a presence. Rage crackles in the air, thick and suffocating. Deculane straightens, instincts on high alert. He turns. Standing there, exuding killing intent so potent it's almost tangible, is Lockhart. Ah, the wizard killer. Surprised you know me. Lockhart smirks, drawing his blade, eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. Deculane exhales, rolling his shoulders. Of course, Lockhart would appear now of all times. A mini-boss built to obliterate magic users. A man immune to spells. Figures you'd show up, Deculane mutters. Right on schedule. Lockhart lunges, steel flashing. Deculane dodges effortlessly, his movements fluid. Lockhart's smirk falters. Fast for a mage, he grits out, increasing the speed of his strikes. But no matter how fast or brutal the attacks, Deculane slips past each one like smoke. Then when the moment is right, crack! Lockhart's head snaps back as Deculane delivers a devastating counterpunch straight to his jaw. Lockhart stumbles. His world tilts. That shouldn't be possible. Deculane cracks his knuckles, nonchalant. Not every mage is useless in a fistfight. The battle is over in minutes. Lockhart, battered and defeated, lies sprawled on the ground, wheezing. Deculane looms over him, unimpressed. Another system notification pops up. Death variable avoided. +3 store currency. Lockhart glares at him, fury twisting his bruised face. Traitor. That catches Deculane's attention. Lockhart spits blood. You're one of them. A realization clicks into place. Red film race. Descendants of demons. Feared. Hunted. Forced into hiding. The very existence of mages is a direct threat to them. Deculane muses. So that's what you are. Lockhart flinches. Shut up. Deculane watches him, uncharacteristically contemplative. He should just finish the guy off. That's what any rational mage would do. But instead he says, I don't think your kind is evil. Lockhart snarls. Don't mock me. I'm not, Deculane replies, voice steady. If I were, you'd already be dead. The conversation is cut short by the arrival of the inspectors. One of them, Ropa, strolls up whistling. Hell of a beating you gave him. Want me to kick him a few more times for you? Deculane waves him off. No need. With practiced ease, he uproots a tree with his telekinesis and transmutes it into an enchanted rope. Tossing it to Ropa, he advises, tie him up with this. Normal restraints won't hold him. Ropa blinks at the impromptu tree-turned rope. Huh, that's actually useful. I know, Deculane deadpans. As the inspectors haul Lockhart away, Deculane turns to leave, feeling an unfamiliar weight lifting from his shoulders. For once, he didn't have to kill. That's nice. The next day, his peace is short-lived. Yariel, his ever-exasperated half-sister, bursts into his training room, slamming an envelope onto his desk. Letter from Burkt, she announces, arms crossed. They're summoning all mages for a meeting. First time in 15 years. Deculane stares at the letter, fingers tapping against the wood. Burkt's call. A new main quest has begun. The meeting is set for a week later, allowing Deculane to bring one guard along for the journey. Yariel, ever the responsible one, suggests Jeff for the role, but Deculane immediately shuts it down. He's a driver, not a warrior, he scoffs. The man flinches when pigeons fly too close to the carriage. Yariel, crossing her arms, insists that traveling to Burkt is dangerous, and he should take someone. Her voice is firm, but there's something else concerned. That alone is enough to make Deculane raise an eyebrow. He leans in slightly, watching as she hurriedly clarifies loudly, I just don't want to deal with the aftermath if you die. A blush creeps onto her face, and she quickly pivots. I'll pick someone for you. Just leave it to me. Fine, Deculane shrugs, amused. I'll trust your judgment. Try not to get me killed. Meanwhile, at Freyheim's outpost, Julie is knee-deep in training young knights, instructing them in swordplay with her usual fiery intensity. Watching from the sidelines, a vice captain mumbles to himself, conflicted. A mission request has come in, but he's not sure how to break the news to Julie. He nearly jumps out of his skin when Veron suddenly appears beside him, coolly responding to his inner monologue. Just ask. The vice captain hesitates. The commission is for guarding Deculane. Veron arches a brow. Not just him, right? The whole train? Yes, but we both know she'd never agree if it were just him. Veron considers this, then smirks. Tell her, she won't let personal feelings get in the way of duty. Despite the reassurance, the vice captain still worries. Julie is many things, proud, driven, occasionally terrifying but rational when it comes to Deculane. That's questionable. Nonetheless, he nods and heads off to inform her, while Veron lingers behind, a dark shadow flickering behind his unreadable expression. Burkt, also known as Alphenes, is a towering stronghold in the northernmost reaches of the continent, sitting at an altitude of 3,500 meters. It's the heart of magical authority, home to the elders who dictate the course of magic itself. Even the prestigious magic tower bows to its influence. It is a land of absolute power, and the floating island above it is where history is written in arcane script. A summons to Burkt is considered an honor, a rite of passage for only the most esteemed sorcerers. But for those who know the truth, it carries another meaning, the mage's grave. At the train platform, life moves on in its usual rhythm: farewells, last-minute preparations, and the crisp bite of mountain air. Among the bustling figures, a silver-haired girl nods in approval, ensuring all arrangements are in order. Then, with perfect timing, she announces his arrival. Deculane steps onto the scene, the embodiment of composed indifference, clad in his usual sharp attire. Behind him, a kid practically vibrating with excitement gawks at the snowfall. April and it's snowing! This was worth it! Before Deculane can roll his eyes, an all-too-familiar voice cuts through the air. From here on, the Order of Freyheim will be handling security. Julie. Deculane watches with great amusement as her expression undergoes a rapid transformation, first pale as a ghost, then burning red with barely concealed frustration. She straightens her posture, stiff as a board, and forces herself into a professional tone. We'll ensure a smooth and safe journey. He doesn't bother to hide his smirk. Julie, meanwhile, is internally combusting. The words of their last conversation replay in her head. Smile for me once a month. Am I supposed to grin now? She panics. Do I go for a polite smile? A confident one? A full-blown grin? The sheer idiocy of it all has her fuming, but she keeps it together. For now, before things can get more awkward, Veron steps in, making his presence known. Deculane immediately scans him. Unlike the others, this man carries an air of quiet confidence. Not a single drop of mana leaks from him, meaning either he's nothing special or he's concealing something dangerous. I'll be personally overseeing security, Veron declares casually. I hope you don't mind. Deculane doesn't respond right away, merely studying him. Then finally he shrugs. Suit yourself, Julie, seeing her chance, bolts. But before she disappears completely, she does something unexpected. She flashes him a quick, forced smile, the kind that looks like it physically hurt to make. Deculane stares after her, completely baffled. Who the hell was that? One of the knights, watching the whole exchange, mutters, Is Captain Julie okay? No clue, Deculane deadpans. But she did keep her word. Hours later, comfortably settled in his private cabin, Deculane informs Veron to get some rest, as they have a long journey ahead. Veron, without protest, leans back and closes his eyes. Left alone with his thoughts, Deculane re-examines the situation. A summons to Berkt is rarely a good sign. While it stands as the pinnacle of magical academia, its secondary reputation as the mage's grave is well earned. Too many figures of power have entered and never returned. Adding to the complications, Deculane knows that one of these trains is practically guaranteed to be targeted for destruction. The game's script ensured that the original Deculane, he would have picked the worst possible train just for the sake of arrogance. Him! He intends to pick the safest damn option available. To do that, he needs information. Normally, he could have tapped into Deculane's darker connections, but since he erased those the moment he took over, he has to rely on a different method, strategy. His mind flickers to his new martial arts training, his latest attempt to counter the unpredictability of this world. His comprehension skill has been refining his technique at an impressive rate, but he still has a long way to go. Glancing over at Alan, Deculane is reminded of the boy's earlier enthusiasm about accompanying him. Now, the kid is slumped over, drooling in his sleep, snot and all. Gross. Deculane grimaces. Germophobia aside, he allows himself a brief moment of amusement. Even if Alan is completely useless in a fight, he at least brings a sense of normalcy to the madness. Soon the train reaches the halfway point of its journey. No attacks, no incidents. Everything has gone smoothly, which means something must be wrong. Deculane, ever the skeptic, tightens his grip on his upgraded wood steel shuriken, reinforced with Midas touch. He had spent hours ensuring that multiple pieces of wood steel were subtly positioned throughout the train, embedded in the walls, disguised as buttons, even woven into Alan's coat just in case. Yet, despite all his preparations, a single nagging thought lingers in his mind. Why has nothing happened yet? Something is still off, and Deculane is determined to figure out what. Turns out the professor's excessive use of Midas touch drained his mana reserves more than expected. He had prepared for the worst, but secretly he wished for a peaceful, uneventful trip. Of course, fate had other plans. Just as he exhaled in relief, the front of the train exploded into flames. A few days prior, snowy peaks framed the horizon as Declan prepared for departure. In the carriage, he casually requested Blondie to put her book down for once. Attempting small talk, he asked if she was drowning in assignments at the Magic Tower. She nodded at the first part, but admitted to skipping a few classes here and there. Not exactly thrilled about this conversation, she waited for the lecture, but instead, Declan simply shrugged. All good, he said nonchalantly. Surprisingly, her father had praised her efforts, acknowledging her dedication despite her fixation on becoming an archmage. Blondie scoffed at the thought. If she couldn't even handle small setbacks, how could she ever reach such heights? Then, as if sensing her internal doubts, Declan's expression shifted. She could see it in his eyes. He had thoughts about her future. Before she could ask, she pivoted to a different question. Why are we leaving early? The Brecht assembly is still days away. With a heavy sigh, her father finally dropped the truth. Because Brecht isn't just an assembly, he said. It's the graveyard of mages. A cold shiver ran through her. She had always thought of the rumors as exaggerated bedtime stories. But now her father confirmed it. Every Brecht summoning resulted in casualties. 15 years ago, 11 mages never returned. And yet being invited was an honor, a symbol of prestige. Skipping it wasn't an option. Absent families were immediately replaced without a second thought. Her father smirked. You see, Brecht is the perfect way to clean out the prestigious trash. Julie froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The entire assembly wasn't just about politics, it was a brutal survival game, where ambitious sorcerers took out their competition. That was the real reason for their early departure. His sources had leaked intel that the later trains would be targeted by a powerful group. Blondie clenched her fists. She had always known their world was ruthless, but this was beyond her imagination. Days later, Alan and the professor enjoyed their peaceful slumber on the train. Then boom! The explosion snapped Veron and the professor awake. Alan yelped as a blinding light filled the compartment. The train lurched violently. Alan, barely able to speak, jumped in pure terror when he realized the entire train was suspended in midair. Declan clicked his tongue. His quick use of telekinesis had saved them. "Good thing I crammed telekinesis practice before the trip," he muttered. Meanwhile, on the train's roof, a group of bandits smirked. Taking down a train packed with professors? It was going to be a massive payout. Too bad they chose the wrong cart. Declan's smirk widened. With a flick of his fingers, wood steel shards shot toward the attackers. Screams followed. Alan, watching in horror, felt his jaw hit the floor. Declan sighed. "Too much for your delicate mind?" Before Alan could answer, the professor knocked him out cold. "There, nap time." Turning to Varan, he issued a command. "Evacuate Alan and the others. I'll handle this mess." Varan hesitated but complied, rounding up the passengers. Meanwhile, Declan faced the remaining thugs. "You just signed your death warrants," he informed them, flexing his fingers. The battle was brutal, and the professor was burning through mana reserves like crazy. By the time the last attacker fell, he was running on fumes. Just as Varan reported the passengers were safe, Declan felt it. Something was off. Varan's gaze held a strange, unsettling intensity. Then it hit him. Varan's aura surged, thick with murderous intent. Declan cursed himself. He had let his guard down. Varan tilted his head, almost impressed. "You really have a talent for survival, Professor," he said. "But it's time to end this." Declan narrowed his eyes. "So this was your plan all along?" Varan's expression didn't change. "I fulfilled my duty, got the passengers to safety. Now, I collect my reward." Declan clenched his fists. His mana reserves were dangerously low, and now his own guard had turned against him. "Who's pulling the strings?" he asked. "Is it Julia?" The moment her name left his lips, Varan snapped. His killing intent spiked. "Don't you dare speak her name." Declan sighed. "Oh, great, a delusional fanatic." Varan's eyes darkened. "She's an upstanding knight. She would never stoop to this. I, however..." He tightened his grip on his blade. "I have no such honor. I will kill you for Master Julia." The professor groaned internally. Of course, it had to be a fanboy. With no mana to spare, Declan made a split-second decision. He released his telekinetic hold on the train. The entire carriage tilted violently. Somewhere else, Sylvia's servant knocked on her door. "Lady Sylvia, are you ready to try Brecht's famous snow cones?" Without missing a beat, she responded, "Give them all to Sirio." The servant blinked. "But I'm not in the mood," she muttered, her thoughts elsewhere. The servant hesitated. "Are you waiting for someone?" Sylvia said nothing. Sylvia takes a trip down memory lane, guilt gnawing at the edges of her thoughts. The day she visited her late mother, Cielia von Elamine Alad, had been just another mundane afternoon. She'd poured her heart out, ranting about school, assignments, and of course her number one headache, Professor Deculain. He buried students under mountains of work, acting like he was the only professor alive. She went on and on, lost in her complaints, when a faint sound interrupted her. Curious, she peeked around the tombstones and froze. There, standing in his usual noble posture, was Deculain. Sylvia never pegged him as the morning type, yet there he was, standing solemnly before a grave. He was full of surprises, but this was something else. And then her jaw nearly hit the ground. A single teardrop slid down Deculain's cheek. Her mind went blank. The ice-cold, untouchable professor was crying. For the first time, he didn't seem like an arrogant, high and mighty mage. He was just a man who had lost someone dear to him. That single tear shattered the perfect image she had of him. It was like watching a shooting star, beautiful, fleeting, and impossible to forget. Then her father's words crashed back into her thoughts. The shady group plotting an ambush on the late departing trains. Her fingers curled into fists. Deculain still hadn't arrived at Brecht. Anxiety clawed at her chest. Flipping through her lecture notes, a reckless idea formed in her mind. Without hesitation, she pulled out a magic stone. Magic had 3 primary attributes, all originating from the caster. She already controlled 3 fundamental elements. Channeling her mana, she shaped the stone into a bird, a swift messenger. She whispered her intent. The bird took off, slicing through the wind, becoming her eyes. Meanwhile, Deculain was barely hanging on. A few broken bones, mana reserves running dangerously low, but hey, at least the train hadn't completely derailed. Iron Man would help him recover soon, but he needed time. Hiding out of sight, he hoped to buy himself a moment to breathe. But Veron had other plans. That vicious bastard wasn't done playing with him. Deculain scowled. How was this guy still in one piece? He hurled a wood steel shard straight at Veron, but the knight dodged with irritating ease. His protective qui flared like a living shield, making it clear he wasn't going down without a fight. Veron grinned, a wolf playing with its prey. Still clinging to life, Professor. How pitiful. Deculane had to admit it, Veron had the upper hand. Even at his peak, defeating him wouldn't have been easy. Now, with exhaustion weighing him down and his mana tank nearly bone dry, the odds were completely against him. But Deculane wasn't the type to roll over and die. A single thought surfaced resolute. His ace in the hole. The skill burned through his mental power, keeping him standing no matter what. If his resolve wavered, his body wouldn't bend. His mind could disengage, but his magic, it would keep going. It was all or nothing. Veron, eyes burning with rage, went full beast mode. His sword gleamed in the dim light, swinging down with lethal precision. Deculane knew one hit meant death. Would he wake up in his office again, or was this really it? Blood splattered, painting the train car red. Swift soared through the sky, racing toward the crash site. Veron's instincts screamed for vengeance. He lunged, ready to end it, and then something shifted. The air wavered unnaturally. The space around them distorted, knocking Veron off balance. Deculane didn't question it. He acted. A flash. A sickening crunch. Veron's hand severed, clean tumbled through the air, blood spraying in its wake. A scream ripped through the night. Deculane, gasping for breath, staggered forward. Veron clutched his bleeding arm, eyes wide in disbelief. What? What did you do? Honestly? Deculane had no idea, but the fight was over. With the last of his mana, he hurled a wood steel blade, sending Veron reeling backward. The knight teetered at the edge of the train, clinging to the doorway by his remaining hand. Deculane stepped forward, victorious. Veron, panting, demanded, "What the hell was that? How did you turn the fight?" Deculane had no answers, but now that he had the upper hand, he wanted something in return. "Why did you want me dead?" he asked. "I don't recall wronging you." Veron's gaze darkened. "You wronged my liege." Deculane frowned. "Julia?" A vein throbbed in Veron's forehead. The mere mention of her name sent him spiraling into fury. "Don't say her name with that filthy mouth." His voice shook with rage. "She never asked for this. You wouldn't understand." Deculane studied him carefully. "Who is Julia to you?" Veron hesitated. His grip trembled. The question stung. Memories flooded back. A scrawny boy, beaten and cornered by noble brats, accused of a crime he never committed. A woman strong, fearless, stepping in to take responsibility for him. Julia, she had been his salvation. His mentor, the only one who ever gave a damn. Over time, admiration had twisted into something deeper, something unspoken, something he could never voice. His feelings were a burden she didn't need. And now he was convinced that Deculane would be the end of her. Deculane sighed. "So that's it. You think I'll destroy her?" Veron's glare burned through him. "I don't think I know." Deculane, unfazed, met his gaze. "Then you're wrong." He extended a hand. "I'll change the outcome. I won't let this story end in disaster." Veron's grip loosened, but his resolve didn't. Mana surged through his veins as he spat out, "I don't need your words. I need you dead." And with that, he made his final move. With a heavy sigh, Deculane knows that his stubborn choice will haunt Julia for eternity. There's only one thing left to do, so he kicks Veron off the train. Meanwhile, Julia's subordinates catch her lost in thought, most likely worrying about Veron. She brushes it off, telling herself Veron is more than capable of taking care of himself. Falling through the endless sky, Veron lets his tears fall freely, his only wish now being for his liege to live a happy life. Above, Swift flies high, providing Sylvia with a full aerial view of the crash site. As her magic eyes take in the scene, she pieces the situation together. Deculane killed his own guard. The knight fell off the cliff into oblivion. But it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Veron had made the first move, aiming to kill Deculane, only to fail miserably. The professor had no choice but to eliminate him in self-defense. Taking it all in, Sylvia clenches her fists. She understands, but that doesn't mean she's okay with it. Just then, Sirio calls her back to reality, reminding her that the assembly is about to begin. With one last glance at her magic bird, she forces herself to focus. Still, she can't shake the nagging worry knowing at her will Deculane even make it in time. Meanwhile, at the crash site, the minions of the Security Bureau are buzzing with excitement. Their vice chief, Lilia Freemian, has arrived for an official investigation. As she surveys the wreckage, her eyes narrow. Attacks before Brecht's assembly? Not exactly shocking. What is shocking, however, are the casualties. 2 people missing. One Knight Veron, and one Professor Deculane. That name catches her off guard. A guard leads her to their supervisor for more details, but before she can follow, something catches her eye. A small unconscious boy, most likely a passenger, collapsed from sheer shock. She makes a mental note to check on him later, then turns back to the investigation. The surviving passengers recall a knight saving them, evacuating them safely from the crash site. But one detail stands out, the train. Floating midair? Lilia frowns. That shouldn't be possible. One witness pulls out a photo he took in a panic, confirming the absurd claim. And just as she's trying to wrap her head around it, an eerie voice echoes in her mind. Knight Veron is dead. He did everything he could to eliminate Deculane, but he failed, and the head professor survived. Lilia stiffens. A telepathic message? That's unsettling, but useful. She looks around sharply, but sees no one nearby capable of transmitting such a spell. Just more unanswered questions. Before she can dwell on it, a guard rushes up to her. Someone's coming from the crash site. Her gaze snaps toward the approaching figure. There he is. A man with a noble posture, worn out and bruised, walking with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Professor Deculane. He hasn't even noticed the crowd or Lilia yet. His mind is elsewhere. The realization is sinking in. If not for that strange phenomenon back on the train, he would be dead. No dramatic last stand. No heroic escape. Just another corpse at the bottom of a cliff, forgotten. And worse, he never would have figured out who or what saved him. Lilia steps forward, calling out, "Head Professor Deculane, are you all right?" She introduces herself as Lilia Freemian from the Security Bureau and informs him that he needs to fill out a report. Deculane doesn't even pretend to listen. "What time is it?" he asks. Lilia blinks. 3:30. Deculane exhales, calculating. He has 6 hours to get to Brecht. Lilia, doing her job, attempts to question him further, but before she can get a single answer, Deculane vanishes. Gone. In the blink of an eye. The workers, the guards, even the passengers, no one saw where he went. Lilia clenches her fists. "Are you kidding me? Did he just cast Accelerate Magic and ditch me?" Her irritation flares. Even after all that blocking the train explosion, fighting off assassins, dueling a knight, this guy still had enough mana left to use high-level speed magic? Lockhart was right about him. He's a damn monster. At the Brecht assembly, the grand hall is packed. The clock strikes 9:30, and Sylvia's eyes flick toward the doors, still waiting for Deculane to arrive. The host, all formal and composed, thanks the attendees for answering their summons. Then the atmosphere shifts. A monstrous surge of mana ripples through the air, making the room go still. Sylvia's breath catches. She knows that presence. Destined, the great leader of Brecht, a living legend. A man who abandoned the outside world on his own terms. If she ever wants to claim the title of Archmage, she must reach his level. A near impossible feat. The roll call begins. Giltheon of the Illid family, present. Ethanzik of the Brand family, present. Baroon of the Veorad family, present. Helm of the Rewind family, present. And then, Klein of the Deculane family. Silence. The host clears his throat. Klein of the Deculane family. More silence. The murmur starts. Whispers, snickers, barely restrained laughter. The host speaks again. Final call. Klein of the Deculane family. If no response, the Deculane family will be expelled from the 12 sorcerers. The gossip swells like wildfire. How the once mighty Deculane line has fallen. How this disgrace of a head will go down as the worst in history. How laughable it is that he thinks himself worthy of standing among them. Sylvia grits her teeth. They have no idea. They don't know what he's been through. The host takes a breath, preparing to move on. Then the doors burst open. A gust of wind surges through the hall. The temperature seems to drop. Standing in the doorway, battered but unshaken, is Klein of the Deculane family. Present.